Hi, I'm Hayley, and before my vestibular symptoms started, I was a very active person. I'm a ESL teacher, and I had lived all over the world. I was a really avid traveler. I lived in France for a number of years, and I lived in Hawaii and did my master's degree there. And I had taught in Thailand and had traveled all over the place. I was also very physically active. I was a marathon runner, and I loved to just hike and be outside in nature. I was just always doing things, probably too many things, and yeah. So my vestibular symptoms started about 2 years ago on Christmas Eve. And I remember them starting because I woke up Christmas Eve morning and I was feeling kind of off, and I started wrapping Christmas presents, and I got up from wrapping Christmas presents, and I just remember like all of a sudden feeling really lightheaded, and the whole room kind of was just like swaying and like turning, and I had to sort of just stop because I thought I was gonna fall over. And then all of a sudden from there, I got a really bad migraine, and I was no stranger to migraines. I've had migraines for many years now, but this was like the worst migraine I had ever gotten, and I just thought, it's fine, it's migraine, it'll go away eventually. So I sort of just pushed through it, but I can describe it as sort of the never-ending migraine. It just never went away. Eventually the headache went away because I previously would get headaches with my migraines, but it was just sort of the dizziness never went away, and sort of that lightheaded feeling never went away, and that disconnected feeling from the world never went away, and it just got worse and worse and worse. Those symptoms just stayed and got worse to the point where it was sort of hard for me to walk and to drive, and I just felt like, yeah, just really like there was sort of like a wall between me and the rest of the world, and that I was just completely disconnected from myself and from everybody else. And if I would turn or if I would move, the whole room would sort of move with me. And for those first few weeks especially, I had spinning vertigo. So the room would spin, and I would spin with it. It would spin around me. And so that spinning vertigo subsided, but the other symptoms stayed, and they just didn't leave. Yeah, so medically, I was really worried in the beginning. I think like many people with vestibular disorders, I was worried that, you know, maybe I had a brain tumor or I was dying or something was wrong with me. I was really fortunate in that my husband works in the medical field, so he realized that I needed to see a specialist right away. So instead of going to a primary care provider, I started seeing specialists right away. So I got in to see an ENT and neurologists. So I saw a few different ENTs and a few different neurologists and got tested, and you know, all of my tests came back as fine and okay. So, you know, people didn't really know what to do with me. I was originally diagnosed with vestibular neuritis, and then later diagnosed with vestibular migraines. As far as medications go, I was given meclizine, and that didn't work. That actually made me feel worse. I was given just various different migraine medication, that I trialed and erred. And there were different migraine medications that didn't work for me. I eventually did find a migraine medication that works well for me, so that's great. I also tried different sort of alternative therapies. So I saw a functional neurologist, which is actually just like a chiropractor. That did not work well for me. I saw a regular chiropractor, which is nice, but I'm not sure if it really did much. I saw a massage therapist, I saw acupuncturist. So all those things, you know, they made my body feel nice. I'm not sure whether or not they did or didn't help with the vestibular aspect though. Okay. I started with vestibular therapy because I was referred to vestibular therapy by my ENT, and I actually saw 3 different vestibular therapists. So I started seeing a vestibular therapist when I was in Hawaii, and I saw them for a bit, and it was helpful, but I only saw them for a short amount of time because then I actually had to move for my husband's job. And so then I started seeing a different vestibular therapist when I moved, and that wasn't as helpful. And then I moved again, and then I was referred to see my 3rd vestibular therapist, and that was very helpful. And so that's a piece of advice that I would give when you're looking for a vestibular therapist, is really just to sort of do your due diligence when you're researching for vestibular therapists, because not all vestibular therapists are equal. I'm sure all vestibular therapists have great intentions, but not everybody is necessarily trained in the same manner to be vestibular therapists. My understanding is that physical therapists, if they want to specialize in vestibular therapy, it's really up to them to do that work and to get that specialization. So even if they say they can do vestibular therapy, it's really up to you to take the time and to ask them the questions about how much education they have in vestibular therapy. So yeah, after working for a long time, about a year in vestibular therapy for with my third vestibular therapist, it was really helpful for me in my recovery and helping me meet my goals. And I think that's because I was working with a vestibular therapist who really knew what she was doing and was really tailoring the vestibular therapy to my specific goals. So my specific goals, one thing that I really wanted to do was get back into running. So that was really helpful. Vestibular therapy was really helpful with that. I'm trying to remember what my goals. I really wanted to get back to working. Computer work was specifically really difficult for me, so vestibular therapy was helpful with that. Also with turning, that was something that was difficult for me. Driving, bright lights, hiking, what else? What were my goals? I'm trying to remember, I had so many of them. Oh, kayaking was a goal for me. So like everyday things, doing the dishes was something that I wanted to be able to do. Bending over was really hard for me. So like everyday things definitely were goals for me, but then also just fun things that brought me joy in my life that I couldn't do anymore, that I wanted to be able to do with my family and friends. So I think one of the hardest things about having a vestibular disorder and having vestibular symptoms is that it really takes you out of yourself. And at least for me, was that I really kind of lost a lot of aspects of my life for a while. So I had to stop working because I couldn't work anymore. I unfortunately my husband and I had to move back in with my parents for a while so that they could help be caregivers for me, because, you know, I couldn't cook meals or do laundry. And, you know, so it's just sort of your autonomy can be sort of stripped away, and different aspects of your identity can be stripped away, and it sort of feels like you're losing your life. And I know that's scary to hear, and that's really difficult, and I don't wish that upon anyone. And of course you don't want that to happen to anyone. And you know, if I could choose between having the vestibular order or not having the vestibular order, of course I would wish not to have it, but it did happen. And so what I've learned from that, I think, and learned from having lost all of those things, is that then you sort of are forced to rebuild back from that, and you learn what is yours and what you really believe in and what you really want, and sort of what is other people's, and sort of other people's beliefs or other people's values, or other people's stuff, or maybe things that you did in the past just because you thought you had to or you should do them, but not necessarily because you wanted to or because they belonged to you. And so it sort of gives you that opportunity to reevaluate your life and learn more about yourself. So that's what I've learned from my vestibular disorder about myself. So it really allows for a lot of self-reflection and introspection. Yeah. So right now I see myself as being able to manage my vestibular disorder. And I think goal-wise, I am back now to working part-time, but I would like to be able to be working full-time. And I'm back to running again. But I would eventually like to, I think, run another marathon at some point in my life. So those are two goals that I have for myself. So some advice that I have for other people would be, first of all, be patient with yourself. I know that's a really difficult one, and it's really hard to hear, especially when you're in the middle of everything and when you're experiencing so much pain, and you just want to get better. But try your best just to be patient with yourself and not to compare yourself to others. And that can be really difficult too, because you'll see some people who might be getting better faster than you or taking longer than you, but just give yourself grace and give yourself the time that you need. Try to find a community of other vestibular disordered people. It's really nice to have people that you can lean on who understand what you're going through. It's important to have, you know, a support system at home if you can, but it's also important to have a community of people who understand what you're going through and who are going through it with you. I think also therapy is important, so I really recommend that, not just vestibular therapy, but I urge people to try to find just like a therapist or counselor, because it can be a very isolating experience having a vestibular disorder. And if you can't afford or unable to find a therapist, you know, at least trying to find somebody that you can speak to maybe a friend or a family member, but please don't keep everything to yourself, but somebody trusted that you can speak to. And then I think my last piece of advice would, oh no, I have two more pieces of advice. I think movement is extremely important, and that's something that I found out really late that I wish I had known earlier. It's counterintuitive, actually, that you don't want to move when you have a vestibular disorder because it makes you feel dizzy, but I actually think that moving can be helpful. Like exercise and movement actually seems to be really good for people who have vestibular disorder. Not saying you should just like go out there and like run 10 miles, but baby steps in movement and exercise. And my last piece of advice would be to do the best you can to find resources and education, to educate yourself about what's going on in your body and what's happening in your vestibular system, because I think that can be really empowering and important to know sort of what's happening, so that you can understand it yourself, and so also you can sort of do your best to educate the people around you in your life. One resource that I found really helpful was the study coach. So those would be my pieces of advice, my words of wisdom.